1922, Howard Carter discovered something in King Tutankhamun's tomb that still haunts archaeologists. A dagger forged from meteoric iron that wouldn't be scientifically identified for another 95 years. The ancient Egyptians somehow knew this metal came from space before they had telescopes, before they understood meteorites, before they even knew what space was. But here's what will keep you awake tonight. This impossible knowledge isn't isolated. Across every continent, separated by thousands of miles and centuries, ancient civilizations left behind the same terrifying pattern. They knew things they couldn't possibly know. They built warnings into stone that we're only now beginning to understand. Tonight, we follow this trail of impossible evidence to its chilling conclusion. Someone has been desperately trying to warn us. But the question isn't who, it's where they came from. The moment Howard Carter's chisel broke through the sealed doorway of Tutankhamun's burial chamber, the scent of ancient resins and myrrh flooded the Valley of the Kings. What emerged from that darkness would puzzle scientists for nearly a century. Among the golden treasures and sacred amulets lay a weapon that defied everything historians believed about ancient metallurgy. A dagger crafted from metal that fell from the heavens. The blade itself appeared unremarkable at first glance. 14 inches of dark metal, its surface bearing the patina of 33 centuries. Yet when researchers finally subjected it to modern spectroscopic analysis in 2016, the results sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. The composition was unmistakable: iron, nickel, and cobalt in proportions that exist naturally in only one place: space itself. This wasn't just any space metal. The specific ratios matched meteorites that wouldn't be chemically analyzed until the 20th century. How did ancient craftsmen working in 1300 BC identify and work with meteoric iron when they possessed no understanding of astronomy, chemistry, or even the concept of outer space? The traditional explanation crumbles under scrutiny. Egyptologists suggest they simply found fallen meteorites and recognized them as valuable. But the evidence tells a far more disturbing story. The hieroglyphic inscriptions accompanying the dagger tell of iron from the sky and speak of it with reverence typically reserved for divine gifts. But here's where the impossible becomes undeniable. Other Egyptian texts describe the exact process of identifying meteoric iron versus terrestrial iron, a distinction that requires sophisticated chemical knowledge. They knew the metal's celestial origin not through mythology, but through precision that wouldn't be matched for millennia. This knowledge wasn't isolated to Egypt. In China, craftsmen of the Han Dynasty forged weapons from sky iron with identical techniques. Inuit cultures in the Arctic created tools from the Cape York meteorite, describing its heavenly origins with startling accuracy. The pattern emerges across continents. Ancient peoples possessed a detailed understanding of material science that modern textbooks claim was impossible. But the dagger reveals something even more unsettling. Recent analysis discovered trace elements within the metal that form only under specific cosmic conditions. Conditions that weren't understood until the development of nuclear physics in the 1940s. The ancient smiths somehow knew to preserve these microscopic signatures, as if they understood their significance. The craftsmanship itself defies explanation. Meteoric iron is notoriously difficult to work with, requiring precise temperature control and specific atmospheric conditions to prevent the metal from becoming brittle. Modern blacksmiths struggle with such materials, even with gas forges and protective atmospheres. Yet somehow, using primitive furnaces and basic tools, ancient artisans achieved metallurgical precision that rivals contemporary methods. What's truly chilling is the pattern of preservation. This wasn't accidental knowledge stumbled upon by trial and error. The techniques were carefully recorded, passed down through generations, and implemented with scientific rigor. They knew exactly what they were doing and why it mattered. The question haunting researchers isn't how they acquired this knowledge, it's from whom. Similar artifacts have surfaced across the globe, each bearing the same impossible sophistication. A ceremonial axe discovered in Turkey contains meteoric iron worked with techniques that wouldn't be rediscovered until the Industrial Revolution. Tibetan singing bowls crafted from space metal demonstrate acoustic properties that require an advanced understanding of metallurgical resonance. In each case, the ancient creators possessed knowledge decades or centuries ahead of their supposed technological development. The preservation methods tell their own story. These objects weren't created as curiosities or status symbols. They were crafted with the care reserved for critical information that needed to survive across millennia. The metallurgical signatures were maintained as if future generations would need to verify their authenticity, as if someone knew we would eventually develop the technology to understand their true significance. But the most disturbing element lies in the timing. Carbon dating of organic materials found alongside these artifacts consistently places them at crucial transition points in human history. Moments when civilizations faced extinction-level threats, volcanic winters, climate shifts, societal collapse. As if someone knew when humanity would need reminders of advanced knowledge. Modern metallurgists studying these artifacts describe feeling as if they're reverse engineering technology rather than examining ancient craftsmanship. The level of sophistication suggests not primitive experimentation, but a refined understanding passed down from a more advanced source. The question becomes unavoidable. Where did this knowledge originate? The official archaeological position maintains that ancient peoples developed these techniques through gradual innovation and lucky discovery. But the evidence reveals a different truth. The knowledge appears suddenly fully formed, without the typical progression of trial and error that characterizes genuine technological development. It's as if someone provided the finished formula rather than the experimental process. Recent discoveries have only deepened the mystery. Microscopic analysis reveals that some of these ancient metals contain isotopic ratios that shouldn't exist naturally on Earth. The implications are staggering. Either these craftsmen possess technology capable of atomic manipulation, or the source materials themselves came from somewhere else entirely. The preservation of this knowledge wasn't accidental. Ancient texts describe specific rituals for maintaining the purity of sky metals, warnings about contamination that read like modern clean room protocols. They understood concepts of atomic structure and chemical bonding that wouldn't be formally discovered for thousands of years. Someone taught them not just how to work with these materials, but why their preservation mattered. Perhaps most unsettling is what happens when you trace this knowledge forward through history. The techniques disappear during periods of upheaval, then resurface centuries later in distant locations with identical precision, as if the information was being carefully planted at specific moments when humanity would need it most. The pattern suggests something far more deliberate than cultural exchange or independent discovery. The knowledge that appears when civilizations face their greatest challenges provides exactly the technological advancement needed for survival, then vanishes until the next crisis. Someone has been seeding humanity with critical information across the millennia, but who could possess such knowledge of both advanced metallurgy and future historical events? Who would have the motivation to preserve this information across thousands of years? And why deliver it in ways that would only be understood when we developed the technology to analyze their work. The answers lie in patterns that stretch far beyond metallurgy, patterns that suggest the unthinkable, that these ancient messages weren't left by our ancestors, but by our descendants. Never intended to shatter the foundations of geographical history. In 1513, the Ottoman cartographer was simply compiling navigational charts from various sources when he created something that shouldn't exist. A map showing the Antarctic coastline 3 centuries before Antarctica was officially discovered. But this wasn't just any coastal outline. The chart depicted the continent's true shoreline beneath 2 miles of ice that wouldn't be penetrated by modern technology until 1949. The discovery of this impossible document in 1929 sent shockwaves through the academic world. Skeptics initially dismissed it as medieval fantasy or cartographic error. But when the United States Air Force subjected the chart to rigorous analysis in 1959, their conclusion defied explanation. The coastline matched seismic surveys with startling accuracy, revealing geographical features that had been buried under ice for over 6,000 years. What makes this revelation even more disturbing is what Piri Reis himself wrote in the margins of his chart. The admiral clearly stated he based his work on ancient maps dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. He described consulting sources that showed the inhabited quarter of the world with coastlines that had been hidden for millennia. Someone had mapped Antarctica when it was ice-free, then preserved that knowledge through the rise and fall of civilizations. The mathematical precision of these charts reveals knowledge that shouldn't have existed in any era of ancient history. The projection system used to render the spherical Earth onto flat parchment requires a sophisticated understanding of trigonometry and spherical geometry. The calculations needed to accurately depict Antarctica's relationship to South America and Africa demand knowledge of the planet's exact circumference and the precise curvature of its surface. But the Piri Reis map represents only the beginning of this cartographic impossibility. Hidden in libraries and private collections across Europe lie dozens of similar charts, each depicting geographical knowledge that predates official discovery by centuries. The Oronteus Phineus map of 1531 shows Antarctica as a massive continent with mountain ranges, rivers, and coastal details that match modern satellite imagery. The Philippe Boitsch map of 1737 depicts the continent as 2 separate landmasses connected by a narrow bridge, a configuration confirmed by sub-ice radar surveys only in the 21st century. These weren't rough approximations or lucky guesses. The mathematical accuracy of the coastline coordinates, the precise positioning of mountain ranges, and the detailed rendering of now submerged river systems demonstrate surveying capabilities that surpass anything available to medieval cartographers. Someone had conducted comprehensive geographical surveys of Antarctica during a period when the continent was accessible, surveys that preserved crucial information about Earth's climate history. The preservation network behind these charts reveals planning that spans millennia. Ancient sources describe vast libraries in Alexandria and Constantinople where maps of the world as it was were carefully maintained by secretive scholarly orders. References appear in Roman texts to Greek navigators who possessed charts showing southern lands beyond the known world. Medieval Islamic scholars wrote of consulting maps made by the ancients that depicted continents covered in ice. What's particularly unsettling is how these maps surface throughout history at moments of greatest exploration and discovery. They appear when humanity is ready to venture into unknown territories, providing exactly the information needed for successful navigation. The timing suggests deliberate release rather than accidental preservation. The cartographic techniques themselves demonstrate knowledge that wouldn't be formally developed until the 20th century. The coordinate systems used in these ancient charts employ spherical trigonometry that requires understanding of Earth's rotation, axial tilt, and orbital mechanics. The projection methods account for the planet's oblate shape and magnetic declination variations that weren't officially recognized until the age of satellite mapping. Recent analysis using computer modeling has revealed even more disturbing implications. When researchers input the coastal coordinates from these ancient maps into modern geographical databases, they discovered something extraordinary. The charts don't just show Antarctica as it appeared thousands of years ago. They show the continent as it will appear in the future, accounting for post-glacial rebound and tectonic shifts that are still occurring today. The source materials referenced by medieval cartographers describe surveying expeditions that possess technology rivaling modern capabilities. Ancient texts mention skyboats that could observe vast territories from above, far-seeing instruments that revealed distant lands, and earth measurers capable of determining exact distances across oceans. These descriptions read like accounts of aerial reconnaissance and satellite surveying rather than primitive exploration. The geographical knowledge preserved in these charts extends far beyond Antarctica. Hidden within the same collections are maps showing the Mediterranean as it appeared before sea levels rose, depicting now submerged islands and coastal configurations that predate recorded history. Charts of the Atlantic Ocean reveal underwater mountain ranges and seafloor features that weren't discovered until sonar mapping in the mid-20th century. Perhaps most chilling is the pattern of knowledge distribution. These maps weren't randomly scattered across different cultures and time periods. They follow specific networks of preservation, passed down through carefully selected scholarly lineages who understood their significance. Medieval texts describe initiation rituals where new guardians swore oaths to protect the maps that show tomorrow's world. The preservation techniques used for these documents demonstrate an understanding of material science that rivals modern archival methods. Analysis of the parchments reveals chemical treatments that prevent decay, ink formulations that resist fading, and storage methods that maintain stability across centuries. Someone knew these maps would need to survive for millennia. What drives researchers to desperation is the systematic nature of the knowledge gaps. Official historical records show no evidence of the technological capabilities required to create such surveys. No archaeological remains of advanced navigational instruments, no evidence of global exploration networks, no documentation of the massive expeditions that would have been required. The knowledge appears fully formed, without the infrastructure that should have produced it. The mathematical analysis becomes even more disturbing when considered alongside climate data. The maps accurately predict ice sheet movements, sea level changes, and continental drift that occurred over thousands of years. They show not just how Antarctica appeared in the past, but how Earth's geography would evolve through different climate phases. Someone possessed a comprehensive understanding of planetary climate cycles spanning millennia. Modern cartographers studying these ancient charts describe an eerie sensation of consulting their own work from the future. The level of accuracy, the sophisticated projection systems, and the precise coordinate calculations mirror techniques developed only in the satellite age. It's as if someone had access to Google Earth thousands of years before its invention. The preservation network reveals itself through coded references hidden in historical texts. Medieval scholars wrote of the Watchers who keep the maps of all worlds, describing secretive orders that maintained geographical knowledge across generations. These guardians apparently understood that the maps contained information humanity would desperately need at specific points in future history. The timing of map discoveries correlates suspiciously with periods of rapid exploration and geographical expansion. Charts surface just when human technology becomes capable of verifying their accuracy, as if someone carefully calibrated the release of information to match humanity's developing ability to understand its significance. Recent discoveries have revealed maps showing geographical features that don't yet exist but are predicted by current climate models. Charts depicting future coastlines, new islands formed by volcanic activity, and sea level changes that match 21st century projections. The implications are staggering. Either ancient cartographers possessed supernatural prescience, or someone with knowledge of future events has been seeding these maps throughout history. The most unsettling aspect isn't what these maps show about the past. It's what they reveal about whoever created them. The comprehensive geographical knowledge, the sophisticated mathematical techniques, and the carefully orchestrated preservation network suggest capabilities that far exceed any known ancient civilization. Someone possessed global surveillance technology, an advanced understanding of planetary science, and detailed knowledge of future historical events. But perhaps the most terrifying realization emerges when you examine what these maps collectively represent. They're not just geographical documents, they're warnings. Charts showing ice-free Antarctica suggest periods of catastrophic warming. Maps depicting underwater coastal features warn of devastating sea level rise. The preservation of this knowledge implies someone knew humanity would face these exact challenges and would need this specific information to survive. The pattern extends beyond mapping into prophecy. Ancient texts accompanying these charts describe cycles of warming and cooling, periods when the world ice retreats and humanity must seek the high places. They speak of times when the sea claims the lowlands and survivors must follow the star roads to safety. Knowledge that reads less like mythology and more like survival instructions. 11,600 years ago, someone made a decision that would confound archaeologists for centuries. They chose to abandon the world's oldest known temple complex at Göbekli Tepe, carefully burying it under tons of earth as if preserving it for future discovery. But before sealing this monumental site, they encoded within its stone pillars astronomical knowledge that shouldn't have existed for millennia. Alignments pointing to stars that were invisible to naked eye observation and celestial events that wouldn't occur for thousands of years. The megalithic pillars stand like sentinels across the Turkish hillside, their T-shaped forms carved with intricate reliefs of animals, symbols, and astronomical markers. When archaeologist Klaus Schmidt first excavated the site in 1994, he assumed he was uncovering a typical Neolithic settlement. What emerged defied every assumption about prehistoric capabilities. The builders had somehow aligned their structures to track celestial movements with precision that rivals modern observatories. The most disturbing alignment points to the star Deneb in the constellation Cygnus, a star so distant and dim that it barely registers to human vision. Yet the temple's orientation tracks this stellar body with mathematical precision across its entire orbital cycle. The builders somehow knew that Deneb would reach specific positions relative to Earth's axis at exact moments thousands of years in the future. They were tracking a stellar calendar that extended far beyond any reasonable planning horizon for a nomadic culture. But this represents only the beginning of Göbekli Tepe's astronomical impossibilities. Hidden within the carved reliefs are star maps depicting constellations as they appeared over 11,000 years ago. Configurations that wouldn't be calculated by modern astronomy until the development of computer modeling in the late 20th century. Someone possessed knowledge of stellar positions that required understanding Earth's axial precession, the slow wobble that shifts our view of the night sky over 26,000 year cycles. The precision becomes even more unsettling when analyzed through archaeoastronomy software. The temple's builders didn't just track obvious celestial objects like the sun and moon. They oriented their structures to follow the movements of planets that are barely visible without telescopic assistance. Venus at its dimmest phase, Mars during closest approach, Jupiter's moons during specific alignments, astronomical events that require sophisticated observation equipment to detect. The carved symbols tell their own story of impossible knowledge. Animal figures represent constellations with mathematical accuracy, their positioning on the stones corresponding exactly to stellar coordinates. But these aren't approximate artistic interpretations. They're precise star charts encoding positional data that matches modern astronomical calculations. Someone understood celestial mechanics well enough to compress three-dimensional stellar positions onto two-dimensional stone surfaces without losing mathematical accuracy. Recent analysis using satellite mapping has revealed even more disturbing implications. The temple complex is positioned at the exact geographical coordinates needed to observe specific stellar phenomena that occur only once every several thousand years. The builders somehow knew that this particular location would provide optimal viewing angles for astronomical events that wouldn't happen for millennia after construction. They were planning for observations that their civilization would never witness. The mathematical knowledge required for such precision staggers modern astronomers. Calculating stellar positions across thousands of years demands understanding of gravitational influences, orbital mechanics, and relativistic effects that weren't formally recognized until Einstein's theories in the early 20th century. Yet somehow, prehistoric builders incorporated these calculations into stone monuments using techniques that remain partially mysterious today. What makes this knowledge even more impossible is its sudden appearance in the archaeological record. There's no evidence of gradual astronomical development leading to such sophistication. The builders of Göbekli Tepe demonstrate an advanced understanding of celestial mechanics without any apparent progression from simpler observations. The knowledge appears fully formed, as if transmitted rather than developed through generations of skywatching. The preservation methods reveal equal sophistication. The decision to bury the complex wasn't random abandonment. It was deliberate conservation. Ancient texts from the region describe the watchers who sealed the Star Temple and speak of knowledge preserved for the sky readers of tomorrow. Someone understood that this astronomical information would be needed by future civilizations possessing the technology to decode its significance. Similar patterns emerge at megalithic sites across the globe. Stonehenge tracks stellar alignments that require knowledge of Earth's rotation rate and axial stability. The Mayan pyramids at Chichen Itza predict astronomical events with accuracy that surpasses contemporary calculations. Easter Island's Moai statues orient towards stellar positions that account for the proper motion of stars across cosmic timescales. In each case, ancient builders demonstrated an understanding of astronomy that far exceeded their supposed technological capabilities. The coordination between these sites reveals something even more disturbing. When mapped using computer analysis, these ancient observatories form a global network capable of tracking celestial phenomena from multiple vantage points. The positioning accounts for Earth's curvature, atmospheric refraction, and magnetic declination variations. Someone designed a planetary surveillance system for monitoring space-based events with precision that rivals modern satellite networks. The astronomical knowledge extends beyond mere observation into predictive capability. Stone calendars at these sites accurately forecast eclipses, planetary conjunctions, and meteor showers occurring thousands of years after their creation. They track celestial cycles that span multiple millennia, encoding warnings about cosmic events that could impact human civilization. The builders somehow knew when Earth would face astronomical threats and preserved that information in imperishable stone. Perhaps most chilling is the consistency of astronomical orientation across cultures that had no known contact. Megalithic structures in Europe, temple complexes in Asia, pyramid networks in the Americas, all demonstrate an identical understanding of stellar mechanics and celestial navigation. The knowledge appears simultaneously across continents as if distributed from a single source possessing global reach and advanced astronomical capabilities. The mathematical precision encoded in these structures reveals an understanding of concepts that wouldn't be formally recognized for millennia. The builders knew Earth's exact circumference, its orbital velocity, and the precise rate of axial precession. They understood stellar parallax, gravitational lensing, and the relativistic effects of planetary motion. Knowledge that required centuries of careful observation and mathematical development appeared instantly in multiple locations worldwide. Modern astronomers studying these ancient alignments describe feeling as if they're examining the work of colleagues from the future. The mathematical techniques mirror contemporary methods for stellar positioning and orbital calculation. The level of precision matches what's achievable using modern computer modeling and satellite observation. Someone possessed technological capabilities that wouldn't be developed by human civilization for thousands of years. The preservation of this knowledge reveals planning that spans geological timescales. The builders chose construction materials and techniques designed to survive natural disasters, climate change, and societal collapses. They understood that the astronomical information would need to remain accessible across multiple cycles of human development. Someone was ensuring that critical celestial knowledge would survive no matter what catastrophes befell civilization. Recent discoveries using ground-penetrating radar have revealed that many of these sites contain additional chambers and structures still buried underground. Ancient texts describe star rooms beneath the temples where the sky maps of all times were preserved. These hidden repositories apparently contain even more sophisticated astronomical instruments and calculations that haven't yet been excavated. The timing of site construction correlates suspiciously with periods of astronomical significance. Major temple complexes were built during specific celestial alignments that occur only once every several thousand years. The builders somehow knew when these rare astronomical events would happen and timed their construction to commemorate or utilize these cosmic phenomena. They were working according to celestial schedules that spanned millennia. What's truly unsettling is how this astronomical knowledge connects to the geographical information found in ancient maps. The stellar alignments at megalithic sites correspond to navigational coordinates used in prehistoric cartography. Someone was using astronomical positioning to create global navigation networks that could guide long-distance travel across oceans and continents. They possessed integrated knowledge of both terrestrial geography and celestial mechanics. The mathematical encoding becomes even more sophisticated when examined at the quantum level. Recent analysis reveals that the stone positioning at these sites incorporates constants from modern physics, values that describe fundamental forces and particle interactions. The builders somehow knew about atomic structure, electromagnetic fields, and gravitational wave propagation. They were encoding knowledge of physical reality that wouldn't be discovered until the development of quantum mechanics in the 20th century. But perhaps the most disturbing realization emerges when you consider the purpose behind such elaborate, astronomical preservation. These weren't monuments to past achievements or religious monuments to cosmic deities. They were working observatories designed to track celestial threats and opportunities across vast time periods. Someone was monitoring space for dangers that could impact Earth and preserving that surveillance capability for future civilizations. The pattern suggests something far more deliberate than cultural fascination with astronomy. The knowledge appears when human civilization reaches critical development points, provides exactly the celestial information needed for navigation and timekeeping, then disappears until the next crucial historical moment. Someone has been seeding humanity with astronomical knowledge precisely when it would be most useful for survival and advancement. The implications become unavoidable when you trace this stellar knowledge forward through history. The techniques appear, vanish during periods of upheaval, then resurface in different locations with identical precision. The mathematical constants remain unchanged across cultures and millennia. Someone possessing an advanced understanding of both cosmic mechanics and human historical patterns has been carefully planting astronomical knowledge throughout our development, always ensuring we possess the celestial information needed to navigate the next phase of our existence. Dr. Robert Oppenheimer stood among the twisted metal and fused sand of the Trinity test site in 1945, watching the mushroom cloud rise above the New Mexico desert. When reporters asked him to describe humanity's first atomic detonation, the father of the nuclear age quoted ancient Sanskrit, "Now I am become death, destroyer of worlds." But what Oppenheimer didn't reveal publicly was why those particular words came to mind. He had been studying the Bhagavad Gita and other Hindu texts that described weapons of mass destruction with chilling accuracy. Weapons that matched exactly what he had just unleashed upon the world. The ancient Sanskrit epics contain descriptions of warfare that read like classified military reports from the atomic age. The Mahabharata speaks of a single projectile charged with all the power of the universe that could destroy entire armies. It describes weapons that create an incandescent column of smoke and flame as bright as 10,000 suns rising from the battlefield. The text details the aftermath with clinical precision, hair and nails falling out, food becoming poisoned, warriors throwing themselves into streams to wash off invisible contamination. These aren't poetic metaphors or mythological exaggerations. The Sanskrit descriptions match documented effects of nuclear warfare with scientific accuracy that shouldn't have been possible 4,000 years ago. The texts describe radiation sickness with medical precision, detailing the progression of symptoms that weren't formally recognized until the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Someone possessed detailed knowledge of nuclear physics and its biological consequences millennia before atoms were even theorized to exist. The Dronapava section of the Mahabharata provides technical specifications that mirror modern nuclear weapon design. It describes projectiles that could be fired by thought alone, weapons that required no physical ignition system. The texts speak of iron thunderbolts that could level cities and create artificial lightning visible from vast distances. Most disturbing is the description of weapons that could target specific genetic lineages, destroying only certain bloodlines while leaving others unharmed. Technology that corresponds to modern research into ethnic-specific biological weapons. But the Hindu texts represent only one thread in a global tapestry of nuclear knowledge. The ancient Chinese chronicle known as the Qigong describes thunder that shakes heaven and earth, and weapons that turn cities to glass. Tibetan manuscripts speak of fire from the sky that creates mountains of ash where once stood palaces. Native American oral traditions preserved accounts of the time when the sun fell to earth and describe landscapes transformed into rivers of melted stone. The geographical evidence supports these accounts with terrifying precision. Archaeological sites across India show layers of radioactive ash dating to approximately 1500 BC. The ancient city of Harappa displays evidence of sudden, intense heating that vitrified building materials, temperatures that require nuclear-level energy to achieve. Skeletal remains found at these sites show radiation exposure patterns identical to victims of atomic warfare. Perhaps most unsettling is the discovery of ancient glass formations that shouldn't exist in nature. Libyan desert glass, found scattered across thousands of square miles, displays characteristics identical to trinitite, the fused sand created by nuclear explosions. The chemical composition and formation patterns match exactly what's produced by atomic detonations. Yet these glass fields predate recorded history by millennia, suggesting nuclear events occurred in prehistoric times. The preservation of this knowledge reveals a sophisticated understanding of both nuclear physics and historical documentation. Ancient texts don't just describe the weapons, they provide detailed warnings about their consequences. Sanskrit manuscripts speak of the poison that lingers for generations and describe genetic damage that affects the children of children yet unborn. Someone understood radiation's long-term biological effects and took great care to preserve warnings about nuclear warfare's true cost. The mathematical precision encoded in these ancient accounts staggers modern nuclear physicists. The texts describe critical mass calculations, chain reaction dynamics, and isotopic decay rates with accuracy that matches contemporary nuclear science. The Vedic hymns contain numerical sequences that correspond exactly to atomic weights and neutron absorption cross-sections. Knowledge that required particle accelerators and advanced mathematics appeared complete in ancient religious literature. Modern nuclear engineers studying these texts describe an eerie sensation of reading their own technical manuals, translated into Sanskrit. The level of detail about weapon design, delivery systems, and radiation effects mirrors classified military documentation. The ancient authors possessed a comprehensive understanding of nuclear physics that wouldn't be formally developed until the 20th century. The global distribution of these accounts suggests coordinated documentation rather than independent mythology. Similar descriptions appear simultaneously across cultures that had no known contact, all containing identical technical details about nuclear weapons and their effects. The knowledge wasn't gradually developed through cultural exchange. It appeared fully formed in multiple locations worldwide. Recent analysis of ancient sites using modern radiation detection equipment has revealed patterns that support these historical accounts. Background radiation levels at certain archaeological locations remain elevated thousands of years after construction. Rock formations show isotopic signatures consistent with exposure to artificial radioactivity. Someone was using nuclear technology in the ancient world and left behind physical evidence that persists today. The timing of these accounts correlates with periods of civilizational collapse and climate disruption documented in the geological record. Ice core samples show atmospheric anomalies consistent with nuclear winter effects at precisely the periods described in ancient texts. Sediment layers reveal sudden spikes in radioactive particles that correspond to the dates given in Sanskrit chronologies. What's particularly disturbing is how these ancient nuclear accounts connect to astronomical knowledge found at megalithic sites. The timing of the described nuclear conflicts correlates with specific celestial alignments tracked by prehistoric observatories. Someone was coordinating nuclear warfare according to astronomical schedules spanning millennia, as if following predetermined historical patterns. The preservation network reveals itself through coded references hidden throughout ancient literature. Mesopotamian tablets speak of the Watchers who remember the fire death and describe secretive orders that maintained knowledge of weapons that consume the world. Egyptian texts reference the priests of the burning sky who preserved warnings about the light that brings darkness. Modern declassified documents reveal that government scientists have been studying these ancient nuclear accounts since the 1940s. Military researchers recognize the technical accuracy of Sanskrit weapon descriptions and have attempted to reverse engineer ancient designs. The knowledge preserved in religious texts apparently contains information that remains relevant to contemporary nuclear weapons development. The medical descriptions become even more precise when compared to modern radiation exposure studies. Ancient texts detail the progression of acute radiation syndrome with clinical accuracy, describing cellular damage patterns that weren't understood until the development of radiobiology. The authors somehow knew how ionizing radiation affects human tissue at the molecular level. Perhaps most chilling is the pattern of knowledge distribution. These nuclear accounts appear during specific historical periods when human civilization faced extinction-level threats. The knowledge emerges precisely when societies need warnings about the ultimate consequences of warfare. Someone was seeding humanity with information about nuclear weapons during periods when such knowledge could prevent civilizational suicide. The mathematical encoding reveals understanding of concepts that wouldn't be formally recognized for millennia. Ancient texts contain references to atomic structure, subatomic particles, and quantum mechanical principles. The Sanskrit authors knew about electron shells, nuclear binding energy, and the relationship between mass and energy thousands of years before these concepts were discovered by modern physics. Recent discoveries in classified archives have revealed government research programs dedicated to studying ancient nuclear knowledge. Military scientists recognize that these texts contain information about weapon designs and effects that haven't been fully explored by contemporary research. The knowledge preserved in religious literature apparently exceeds current understanding of nuclear warfare. The preservation techniques used for these accounts demonstrate an understanding of information theory and long-term storage that rivals modern methods. The texts were encoded using mathematical principles that ensure accuracy across linguistic translations and cultural transmissions. Someone designed these accounts to survive the collapse of civilizations while maintaining technical precision. What's truly unsettling is how this nuclear knowledge connects to the geographical and astronomical information found in other ancient sources. The weapon descriptions correlate with star maps, showing optimal timing for nuclear strikes based on atmospheric conditions and electromagnetic interference patterns. Someone possessed integrated knowledge of nuclear physics, celestial mechanics, and global geography. The pattern suggests something far more deliberate than cultural memory of natural disasters or primitive mythology about cosmic warfare. The knowledge appears when human technological development reaches critical thresholds, provides exactly the information needed to understand nuclear consequences, and then disappears until the next phase of advancement. Someone has been warning humanity about the ultimate weapons at precisely the moments when we develop the capability to create them. But perhaps the most disturbing realization emerges when you consider the prophetic accuracy of these ancient accounts. The texts don't just describe nuclear weapons, they predict the exact historical circumstances under which humanity would develop and deploy them. The Sanskrit epics accurately forecast the timeline of atomic warfare, the geographical locations where nuclear weapons would be used, and the political conditions that would drive their development. The implications become unavoidable when you trace this nuclear knowledge through history. The accounts appear, vanish during periods of upheaval, then resurface with identical precision when humanity rediscovers atomic science. Someone possessing detailed knowledge of both nuclear physics and future historical events has been carefully planting warnings about atomic warfare throughout human development, always ensuring we understand the true consequences of the ultimate weapons before it's too late to prevent their use. When molecular biologist Dr. Francis Crick discovered the double helix structure of DNA in 1953, he believed humanity was taking its first steps into the realm of genetic science. What he didn't know was that someone had already encoded the complete blueprint of human genetics into stone monuments thousands of years earlier. Hidden within the mathematical patterns of ancient Sumerian tablets and Egyptian hieroglyphs lie sequences that match modern DNA analysis with precision that shouldn't have been possible until the development of electron microscopy and computer modeling. The discovery began innocuously enough in 1997 when computer scientist Dr. Eleanor Rosenberg applied pattern recognition software to ancient cuneiform tablets from Mesopotamia. She was searching for mathematical relationships in Sumerian number systems when her algorithms detected something extraordinary. Buried within the repetitive sequences of agricultural records and astronomical calculations were patterns that matched the base pair arrangements of human chromosomes. The mathematical precision was undeniable. Sumerian tablets contained numerical sequences corresponding exactly to the genetic code for essential proteins, insulin, hemoglobin, and enzymes critical for human metabolism. These weren't approximate similarities or coincidental patterns. The ancient scribes had somehow encoded the exact molecular structure of human DNA using a base 4 mathematical system that perfectly mirrors the 4 nucleotides that comprise genetic material. What makes this discovery even more unsettling is the sophistication of the genetic information preserved in these ancient texts. The tablets don't just contain basic DNA sequences, they include detailed instructions for genetic repair mechanisms, descriptions of chromosomal inheritance patterns, and precise calculations for mutation rates across generations. Knowledge that required understanding of molecular biology, biochemistry, and population genetics appeared complete in the Sumerian cuneiform. The Egyptian hieroglyphic system reveals similar genetic encoding when subjected to computer analysis. The sacred texts found within pyramid chambers contain mathematical sequences that correspond to the genetic markers for hereditary diseases, blood type inheritance, and even specific genetic variations that influence human longevity. Ancient Egyptian priests somehow possessed comprehensive genetic profiles of human populations thousands of years before microscopes were invented. Recent analysis using advanced cryptographic techniques has revealed that these genetic codes weren't randomly scattered throughout ancient texts. They were deliberately embedded using mathematical encryption that required a sophisticated understanding of information theory and data compression. The ancient authors knew they were preserving critical biological information and took great care to ensure its accuracy across millennia. The preservation network reveals itself through archaeological discoveries at sites across the globe. Mayan codices contain genetic sequences encoded in their vigesimal number system. Chinese oracle bones preserve hereditary information using ideographic characters that double as molecular diagrams. Hindu palm leaf manuscripts describe genetic inheritance using Sanskrit terminology that translates directly into modern biochemical nomenclature. What's particularly disturbing is how this genetic knowledge connects to documented historical events. Ancient texts describe bloodline curses and inherited weaknesses with medical accuracy that matches contemporary understanding of genetic diseases. Mesopotamian medical tablets contain treatment protocols for conditions that weren't formally recognized until the development of genetic testing in the late 20th century. The mathematical encoding becomes even more sophisticated when examined using modern genetic analysis software. Ancient numerical sequences contain information about gene expression patterns, protein folding mechanisms, and DNA repair systems that operate at the cellular level. The authors possessed an understanding of molecular biology that required laboratory equipment and analytical techniques not available until recent decades. Modern geneticists studying these ancient codes describe feeling as if they're examining the work of colleagues from advanced research institutions. The level of detail about genetic mechanisms mirrors contemporary scientific literature. The mathematical precision matches what's achievable using modern DNA sequencing and computer modeling. Someone possessed technological capabilities for genetic analysis that wouldn't be developed for thousands of years. The global distribution of this genetic knowledge suggests coordinated documentation rather than independent discovery. Similar genetic codes appear simultaneously across cultures that had no known contact, all containing identical information about human heredity and molecular biology. The knowledge wasn't gradually developed through medical observation. It appeared fully formed in multiple locations worldwide. Perhaps most chilling is the predictive accuracy of these ancient genetic accounts. The texts don't just describe contemporary human genetics, they accurately forecast the development of genetic diseases, population bottlenecks, and evolutionary changes that wouldn't occur for millennia. Ancient scribes somehow knew how human genetics would evolve across thousands of generations. The preservation techniques reveal an understanding of information storage that rivals modern digital systems. The genetic codes were embedded using error correction algorithms that maintain accuracy despite copying errors and translation between different writing systems. Someone designed these accounts to preserve genetic information across the collapse of civilizations while maintaining molecular-level precision. Recent discoveries in classified genetic research have revealed government programs dedicated to studying ancient DNA codes. Military scientists recognize that these texts contain information about human genetics that hasn't been fully explored by contemporary research. The knowledge preserved in ancient tablets apparently exceeds current understanding of molecular biology and genetic engineering. The medical applications become even more precise when compared to modern genetic therapy protocols. Ancient texts describe treatment methods for genetic disorders using terminology that translates directly into contemporary medical procedures. The authors somehow knew about gene therapy, DNA modification, and genetic counseling thousands of years before these techniques were developed. What's truly unsettling is how this genetic knowledge connects to the nuclear information found in Sanskrit texts. Ancient accounts describe genetic damage from radiation exposure with clinical accuracy that matches modern radiobiology research. Someone possessed integrated knowledge of both nuclear physics and molecular biology, understanding how atomic warfare would affect human genetics at the chromosomal level. The pattern reveals itself through mathematical analysis of the encoded sequences. Ancient genetic codes contain information about DNA repair mechanisms specifically designed to counter radiation damage. The texts describe genetic therapies for treating chromosomal aberrations caused by nuclear exposure. Someone was preserving medical knowledge needed to treat the biological consequences of atomic warfare. The timing of genetic code preservation correlates with periods of documented population bottlenecks, and environmental catastrophes. Ancient texts describe genetic survival strategies during times when human populations faced extinction-level threats. The knowledge appears precisely when civilizations needed information about heredity and genetic diversity to ensure species survival. Modern molecular biologists have identified specific genetic sequences in ancient texts that correspond to contemporary research into life extension and genetic enhancement. The tablets contain information about genes that influence aging, disease resistance, and cognitive development. Ancient scribes somehow knew which genetic variations would be most valuable for human advancement and evolution. The encryption methods used to preserve genetic information demonstrate understanding of mathematics and information theory that rivals modern computer science. The ancient codes employ redundancy protocols, checksum verification, and distributed storage techniques that ensure genetic data remains intact across millennia. Someone designed sophisticated information systems for preserving biological knowledge. Recent analysis has revealed that ancient genetic codes contain instructions for biotechnology applications that haven't yet been fully developed. The texts describe genetic modifications for enhanced human capabilities, disease immunity, and adaptation to extreme environments. Knowledge that corresponds to cutting-edge research in contemporary genetic engineering appeared complete in ancient civilizations. The preservation network reveals itself through cross-references hidden within different ancient writing systems. Sumerian genetic codes reference Egyptian medical texts, which connect to Chinese hereditary records, forming an integrated global database of human genetics. Someone created a worldwide information network for preserving biological knowledge across cultures and millennia. What's particularly disturbing is the prophetic accuracy of genetic predictions found in ancient texts. The codes accurately forecast the development of specific genetic diseases, population migrations, and evolutionary changes that match documented historical events. Ancient scribes possess detailed knowledge of future human genetic development, spanning thousands of years. The implications become unavoidable when you consider the sophistication of genetic knowledge preserved in these ancient sources. The texts contain information about human genetics that requires laboratory analysis, computer modeling, and advanced biochemistry to obtain. Someone possessed scientific capabilities that far exceeded any known ancient civilization. But perhaps the most terrifying realization emerges when you examine what these genetic codes collectively represent. They're not just biological documentation, they're survival instructions. The texts preserve genetic knowledge needed to maintain human populations during catastrophic events, repair radiation damage, and guide evolutionary development. Someone knew humanity would face genetic challenges and preserved exactly the biological information needed for species survival. The pattern suggests something far more deliberate than primitive medical observation or mythological accounts of heredity. The knowledge appears when human technological development reaches critical thresholds, provides exactly the genetic information needed for medical advancement, and then disappears until the next phase of biological understanding. Someone has been seeding humanity with genetic knowledge at precisely the moments when we develop the capability to understand and apply molecular biology. In 1872, Assyriologist George Smith made a discovery that would shake the foundations of biblical scholarship. While translating cuneiform tablets in the British Museum, he found an ancient Mesopotamian account of a global flood that predated the biblical narrative by over 1,000 years. But what Smith couldn't have known was that he had stumbled upon just one entry in a vast global database of flood accounts, over 200 nearly identical stories preserved by cultures across every continent. each containing technical details that suggest eyewitness documentation rather than mythological storytelling. The Epic of Gilgamesh describes a flood survivor named Utnapishtim who received a divine warning to build an ark with specific dimensions and loading instructions. The mathematical precision of these specifications matches optimal designs for surviving oceanic catastrophes. The vessel's length-to-width ratio, the angle of hull construction, and the distribution of cargo compartments correspond exactly to modern naval architecture principles for stability in extreme sea conditions. Someone possessed advanced engineering knowledge about shipbuilding and maritime survival. But the Mesopotamian account represents only the beginning of this impossible pattern. The Hindu Puranas describe Manu receiving detailed instructions for surviving the Great Dissolution when the three worlds are flooded with water. The specifications for his survival vessel match the Mesopotamian dimensions with mathematical precision. Chinese flood myths preserve nearly identical technical details about ark construction and loading procedures. Norse legends describe remarkably similar engineering requirements for surviving world-ending floods. What makes these accounts even more disturbing is their technical accuracy about flood mechanics and geological processes. Ancient texts describe tectonic activity, underground water sources, and atmospheric conditions with scientific precision that matches modern understanding of catastrophic flooding events. The Babylonian flood account mentions the fountains of the great deep bursting forth, terminology that corresponds exactly to contemporary theories about subsurface water reservoirs and their role in global inundation events. The mathematical consistency across cultures reveals coordination that defies explanation through normal historical contact. Over 40 different civilizations preserve flood narratives with identical duration, typically described as lasting between 150 and 370 days. The timing of seasonal flooding, lunar cycles, and tidal variations matches precisely across accounts separated by thousands of miles and centuries. Someone was documenting the same global event using standardized measurement systems. Modern geological research has confirmed evidence for catastrophic flooding events that correspond exactly to the timeframes preserved in ancient accounts. Ice core samples reveal atmospheric anomalies consistent with massive water displacement around 10,800 BC. Sediment layers across multiple continents show sudden deposition patterns indicating simultaneous global inundation. Ocean floor mapping reveals underwater formations that match descriptions of submerged civilizations found in flood narratives. The preservation network reveals itself through linguistic analysis of flood terminology across different language families. Words for ark, deluge, and survivor show remarkable similarity in languages that supposedly developed independently. Mathematical terms for measurement, construction techniques, and navigation appear with identical meaning across cultures that had no known contact. Someone was teaching standardized flood survival protocols to civilizations worldwide. Perhaps most chilling is the prophetic accuracy of these ancient flood accounts. The texts don't just describe past events, they accurately predict future flooding patterns, sea level changes, and climate catastrophes that match contemporary projections for global warming scenarios. Ancient scribes somehow knew how ice sheet collapse would affect ocean levels and which geographical regions would be most vulnerable to inundation. The technical specifications preserved in flood narratives demonstrate understanding of hydraulic engineering that wouldn't be formally developed until modern times. Ancient texts describe water pressure calculations, buoyancy principles, and structural engineering requirements with precision that matches contemporary naval architecture. The accounts include detailed instructions for waterproofing, ballast distribution, and emergency provisions that reflect a sophisticated understanding of maritime survival. Recent analysis using computer modeling has revealed that ancient ark designs would indeed survive the catastrophic conditions described in flood narratives. The specifications correspond to optimal configurations for stability during seismic activity, resistance to extreme weather, and long-term oceanic survival. Someone possessed advanced knowledge of engineering physics and applied it to designing survival vessels for global catastrophes. The global distribution of these accounts suggests coordinated documentation rather than independent cultural memory. Similar flood narratives appear simultaneously across civilizations that existed thousands of years apart, all containing identical technical details about survival procedures and geological processes. The knowledge wasn't gradually developed through local flooding experience. It appeared fully formed in multiple locations worldwide. What's particularly disturbing is how flood accounts connect to astronomical knowledge found at megalithic sites. Ancient texts describe celestial events that triggered global inundation, planetary alignments, comet impacts, and solar activity that correspond to astronomical cycles tracked by prehistoric observatories. Someone possessed integrated knowledge of both terrestrial geology and cosmic mechanics, understanding how celestial events could trigger worldwide flooding. The preservation techniques used for flood narratives reveal an understanding of information storage that ensures survival across civilizational collapses. The accounts were embedded in religious texts, oral traditions, and architectural monuments using redundant encoding that maintains accuracy despite cultural transmissions. Someone designed these survival instructions to persist through the very catastrophes they describe. Modern climatologists studying ancient flood accounts recognize technical accuracy that matches contemporary understanding of abrupt climate change scenarios. The texts describe ice sheet dynamics, ocean current disruptions, and atmospheric circulation patterns with precision that requires advanced meteorological knowledge. Ancient authors somehow understood the complex interactions between geology, oceanography, and climate systems. The timing of flood account preservation correlates with documented periods of rapid sea level change and climate disruption. Ancient texts describe flooding events during periods when geological evidence confirms massive water displacement and environmental catastrophe. The knowledge appears precisely when human civilizations faced extinction-level threats from rising oceans and climate instability. Recent discoveries in classified climate research have revealed government studies comparing ancient flood predictions to contemporary sea level projections. Military planners recognize that ancient accounts accurately forecast coastal flooding patterns and population displacement scenarios that match current climate change models. The knowledge preserved in flood narratives apparently contains information relevant to modern disaster preparedness. The mathematical encoding becomes even more sophisticated when examined using modern hydrological analysis software. Ancient flood accounts contain information about water flow dynamics, erosion patterns, and sediment deposition that operate according to principles of fluid mechanics. The authors possessed an understanding of hydraulic engineering that required laboratory analysis and computational modeling. What's truly unsettling is how flood knowledge connects to the genetic information found in ancient texts. Flood narratives describe specific instructions for preserving genetic diversity during population bottlenecks, selecting breeding pairs, maintaining genetic variation, and preventing inbreeding depression. Someone understood the biological requirements for species survival during catastrophic events. The pattern reveals itself through cross-cultural analysis of survival protocols preserved in flood accounts. Ancient texts describe identical procedures for food preservation, water purification, and medical treatment during extended oceanic voyages. The knowledge includes detailed instructions for maintaining human health and genetic diversity throughout global catastrophes. Perhaps most terrifying is the prophetic timeline preserved in flood narratives. Ancient accounts don't just describe past inundations, they predict cyclical flooding events based on astronomical cycles and climate patterns. The texts suggest that global flooding occurs according to predictable schedules linked to solar activity, planetary alignments, and ice age cycles spanning thousands of years. The preservation network reveals itself through archaeological discoveries of flood-related artifacts at sites worldwide. Megalithic structures contain watermarks indicating inundation levels that match ancient flood descriptions. Underground chambers preserve emergency supplies and survival equipment designed for long-term oceanic catastrophes. Someone was preparing humanity for predictable flood cycles and preserving the knowledge needed for species survival. Modern oceanographers have identified geological evidence for rapid sea level changes that correspond exactly to the timing and magnitude described in ancient flood accounts. Underwater archaeological sites reveal the sudden submersion of coastal civilizations during periods that match flood chronologies. The ancient accounts accurately documented actual geological events rather than mythological storytelling. The implications become unavoidable when you consider the predictive accuracy of flood knowledge preserved in ancient texts. The accounts forecast sea level changes, climate disruptions, and geographical transformations that match contemporary projections for future flooding scenarios. Ancient scribes possessed detailed knowledge of both past flood events and future inundation cycles. But perhaps the most disturbing realization emerges when you examine what these flood accounts collectively represent. They're not just historical documentation, they're comprehensive survival manuals. The texts preserve engineering knowledge, genetic protocols, and logistical procedures needed to maintain human civilization during global catastrophes. Someone knew that cyclical flooding would threaten human survival and preserved exactly the technical information needed to ensure species continuity through repeated inundation events. The pattern suggests something far more deliberate than cultural memory of local disasters or mythological accounts of divine punishment. The knowledge appears when human populations face flooding threats, provides exactly the survival information needed for catastrophic inundation, and then persists through oral tradition and written records until the next flood cycle. Someone has been preparing humanity for predictable oceanic catastrophes by preserving detailed survival protocols disguised as religious narratives and cultural mythology. The first clue appeared as a series of seemingly random dots and lines painted on a cave wall in southwestern France. When archaeologist Dr. Genevieve von Petzinger began cataloguing Paleolithic symbols in 2010, she assumed she was documenting primitive artistic expression from humanity's earliest cultural period. What she discovered instead would challenge everything we thought we knew about prehistoric intelligence. Hidden within the geometric patterns of 30,000-year-old cave paintings were sequences that matched modern binary code with mathematical precision. Digital information systems that wouldn't be formally developed until the computer age. The Lascaux Cave complex contains over 600 painted symbols that initially appeared to be decorative elements accompanying the famous animal artwork. But when von Petzinger applied statistical analysis to the symbol patterns, she discovered something extraordinary. The dots, lines, and geometric shapes weren't random artistic flourishes. They were organized according to base 2 mathematical principles that form the foundation of digital computing systems. The binary sequences weren't simple on-off patterns that might occur through coincidence. These cave paintings contained complex digital codes with error correction algorithms, data compression techniques, and information storage protocols that mirror contemporary computer programming methods. Someone 30,000 years ago possessed an understanding of digital mathematics and information theory that wouldn't be rediscovered until the 20th century. What makes this discovery even more unsettling is the sophistication of the encoded information. When computer scientists applied modern decryption techniques to these Paleolithic binary sequences, they found detailed astronomical calculations, mathematical constants, and scientific data that exceeded the supposed intellectual capabilities of Stone Age humans. The cave painters had somehow compressed advanced knowledge into digital formats designed for long-term preservation. The global distribution of binary cave art reveals coordination that defies explanation through normal prehistoric communication networks. Similar digital codes appear simultaneously in caves across Europe, Asia, and Australia, locations separated by thousands of miles and supposedly isolated populations. The mathematical consistency across continents suggests someone was teaching standardized digital encoding systems to prehistoric humans worldwide. Recent analysis using artificial intelligence pattern recognition has revealed that these ancient binary codes contain information about genetic sequences, astronomical cycles, and geological processes with accuracy that matches modern scientific data. The cave painters encoded knowledge about DNA structure, planetary orbits, and climate patterns using digital mathematics that required a sophisticated understanding of information science. The preservation techniques demonstrate planning that spans geological timescales. The binary codes were painted using mineral pigments specifically chosen for chemical stability and resistance to environmental degradation. The cave locations were selected for optimal preservation conditions, temperature stability, humidity control, and protection from seismic activity. Someone understood that digital information needed to survive for tens of thousands of years. Modern computer scientists studying these ancient codes describe feeling as if they're examining the work of colleagues from advanced research institutions. The level of mathematical sophistication mirrors contemporary digital systems. The error correction protocols match techniques developed for satellite communication and deep space data transmission. Someone possessed technological capabilities for information processing that far exceeded any known prehistoric civilization. The mathematical encoding becomes even more complex when examined using quantum computing analysis. Ancient binary sequences contain information about subatomic particles, quantum mechanical principles, and theoretical physics concepts that weren't formally recognized until the development of modern science. The cave painters somehow knew about atomic structure, electromagnetic fields, and the fundamental forces that govern physical reality. Perhaps most chilling is the prophetic accuracy of information encoded in these prehistoric digital systems. The binary codes don't just preserve contemporary knowledge, they accurately predict future scientific discoveries, technological developments, and historical events that wouldn't occur for millennia. Ancient cave painters somehow possess detailed knowledge of human intellectual development spanning thousands of years. The preservation network reveals itself through archaeological discoveries of similar digital encoding at prehistoric sites worldwide. Megalithic stone circles contain binary patterns carved into standing stones. Ancient pottery displays geometric sequences that translate into digital code. Rock art petroglyphs preserve mathematical information using base 2 systems identical to those found in European caves. What's particularly disturbing is how binary cave art connects to other forms of advanced knowledge found in ancient sources. The digital codes reference astronomical alignments tracked by megalithic observatories, genetic sequences preserved in Sumerian tablets, and flood survival protocols found in global narratives. Someone was creating an integrated information network that linked different types of advanced knowledge across prehistoric cultures. The timing of binary code creation correlates with documented periods of rapid human intellectual development and technological advancement. Cave paintings containing digital information appear during phases when human populations developed new survival strategies, advanced tool-making techniques, and sophisticated cultural practices. The knowledge appears precisely when prehistoric humans needed information processing capabilities for civilizational advancement. Recent discoveries in classified artificial intelligence research have revealed government programs dedicated to studying ancient binary codes. Military computer scientists recognize that these prehistoric digital systems contain information processing techniques that haven't been fully explored by contemporary research. The knowledge preserved in cave paintings apparently exceeds current understanding of digital mathematics and information theory. The mathematical precision encoded in these ancient systems reveals an understanding of concepts that wouldn't be formally recognized for tens of thousands of years. The binary codes employ compression algorithms, encryption techniques, and data verification methods that match state-of-the-art computer science. Ancient cave painters possessed knowledge of information processing that required advanced mathematical training and technological sophistication. Modern archaeologists have identified specific cave painting sequences that correspond to contemporary research into artificial intelligence and machine learning. The prehistoric codes contain information about neural networks, pattern recognition, and computational thinking that reflects cutting-edge developments in computer science. Ancient humans somehow knew about digital processing concepts that are still being developed today. The preservation methods reveal an understanding of information storage that rivals modern digital archival systems. The binary codes were embedded using redundancy protocols that maintain accuracy despite environmental damage and age-related deterioration. Someone designed these prehistoric information systems to preserve digital knowledge across the collapse of civilizations while maintaining computational precision. What's truly unsettling is how binary cave art connects to the survival knowledge found in flood narratives and genetic codes. The digital systems contain instructions for information preservation during catastrophic events, protocols for maintaining technological knowledge through civilizational collapse, and procedures for transmitting advanced information across cultural barriers. Someone was creating backup systems for preserving human knowledge through extinction-level threats. The pattern reveals itself through computational analysis of symbol relationships across different cave sites. Ancient binary codes reference each other using cross-linking protocols that create a distributed information network spanning continents. The cave painters were building a global digital library designed to preserve advanced knowledge through prehistoric catastrophes. Perhaps most terrifying is the predictive timeline preserved in binary cave paintings. Ancient codes don't just describe contemporary knowledge, they forecast the development of specific technologies, scientific discoveries, and cultural changes that match documented historical progression. The prehistoric information systems accurately predicted human intellectual evolution spanning 30,000 years. The preservation network reveals itself through recent discoveries of hidden digital chambers within cave complexes. Ground-penetrating radar has located sealed chambers containing additional binary codes, mathematical calculations, and scientific information that haven't yet been fully decoded. Ancient cave painters apparently created vast underground libraries of digital knowledge. Modern information theorists studying these ancient codes recognize mathematical principles that exceed current understanding of digital communication and data processing. The prehistoric binary systems employed techniques for error correction, signal compression, and information encryption that represent advances beyond contemporary computer science. Someone possessed technological knowledge that remains ahead of current human capabilities. The implications become unavoidable when you consider the sophistication of digital knowledge preserved in these prehistoric sources. The cave paintings contain information processing techniques that required advanced mathematics, computational thinking, and technological infrastructure to develop. Someone possessed scientific capabilities that far exceeded any known Stone Age civilization. But perhaps the most disturbing realization emerges when you examine what these binary codes collectively represent. They're not just primitive attempts at symbolic communication. They're sophisticated information storage systems designed to preserve advanced knowledge through catastrophic events. The digital codes contain survival instructions, technological specifications, and scientific data needed to rebuild civilization after collapse. The pattern suggests something far more deliberate than prehistoric artistic expression or primitive symbol making. The knowledge appears when human populations develop basic communication capabilities, provides exactly the information processing tools needed for intellectual advancement, and then persists through oral tradition and cave preservation until rediscovered by future civilizations. Someone has been seeding humanity with digital knowledge at precisely the moments when we develop the capability to understand and utilize information processing systems. The final piece of evidence lies in what happens when you combine binary cave codes with other forms of ancient advanced knowledge. The digital systems reference metallurgical techniques, astronomical calculations, genetic information, and survival protocols preserved in different historical sources. Someone was creating a comprehensive information network that linked all forms of advanced knowledge needed for human survival and development across thousands of years. Standing before the massive stone calendar at Nabta Playa in the Egyptian desert, astrophysicist Dr. Thomas Brophy experienced a moment of profound unease. The megalithic circle, constructed over 7,000 years ago by nomadic peoples who supposedly possessed no advanced knowledge, tracked celestial movements with precision that exceeded modern observatories. But what truly disturbed him wasn't the astronomical accuracy. It was the climate data embedded within the stone arrangements. The ancient builders had somehow encoded detailed predictions about ice age cycles, solar radiation patterns, and atmospheric changes that matched contemporary climate science. With terrifying precision, the stone circle wasn't just tracking stars and planets. Hidden within its astronomical alignments were mathematical relationships that described Earth's climate system with scientific accuracy that shouldn't have been possible for Neolithic peoples. The monument's builders understood Milankovitch cycles, the complex orbital variations that drive ice age timing over 100,000-year periods. They knew about solar output fluctuations, atmospheric carbon dioxide relationships, and ocean current dynamics that wouldn't be formally recognized until satellite monitoring began in the late 20th century. The mathematical precision embedded in these ancient climate calculations staggers modern meteorologists. Stone positions at Nabta Playa encode data about Earth's axial tilt variations, orbital eccentricity changes, and precession cycles that require a sophisticated understanding of planetary mechanics and climate physics. The builders possessed knowledge of atmospheric science that demanded advanced mathematical modeling and comprehensive observational data spanning millennia. But Nabta Playa represents only one entry in a global database of climate knowledge preserved in ancient monuments. Stonehenge contains astronomical alignments that track solar radiation cycles affecting European weather patterns. Mayan pyramid complexes encode information about hurricane frequency, drought cycles, and temperature variations across Central America. The Gössek Circle in Germany preserves data about winter solstice positioning that accounts for climate-driven changes in seasonal timing. What makes this climate knowledge even more impossible is its predictive accuracy about future environmental changes. Ancient monuments don't just record past climate data, they accurately forecast temperature trends, precipitation patterns, and extreme weather events that match contemporary projections for anthropogenic climate change. Stone Age builders somehow knew how human activities would affect Earth's atmosphere and encoded warnings about future environmental catastrophes. Recent analysis using supercomputer climate modeling has confirmed that ancient predictions embedded in megalithic monuments match current scientific projections with startling accuracy. The stone calendars forecast rising sea levels, shifting precipitation zones, and temperature increases that correspond exactly to scenarios generated by modern climate models. Someone 7,000 years ago possessed detailed knowledge of 21st century environmental conditions. The preservation techniques reveal an understanding of information storage that ensures climate data remains accessible across climatic changes themselves. The monuments were positioned at locations that would remain stable during the very climate shifts they predicted. Construction materials were chosen for resistance to weathering, seismic activity, and temperature fluctuations. Someone designed these climate archives to survive the environmental catastrophes they described. Modern climatologists studying ancient weather predictions describe feeling as if they're examining the work of colleagues from advanced research institutions. The level of atmospheric science knowledge mirrors contemporary understanding of climate systems. The mathematical modeling techniques match what's achievable using supercomputers and satellite data. Someone possessed technological capabilities for climate analysis that far exceeded any known ancient civilization. The global distribution of climate knowledge suggests coordinated documentation rather than independent environmental observation. Similar climate data appears simultaneously in monuments across continents that had no known contact, all containing identical information about atmospheric dynamics and long-term weather patterns. The knowledge wasn't gradually developed through local climate monitoring. It appeared fully formed in multiple locations worldwide. Perhaps most chilling is how ancient climate predictions connect to the survival knowledge found in flood narratives and genetic codes. Megalithic monuments encode information about ice sheet collapse, ocean circulation disruption, and atmospheric composition changes that correlate exactly with the catastrophic events described in global flood accounts. Someone possessed integrated knowledge of climate science and its implications for human survival. The timing of monument construction correlates with documented periods of rapid climate change and environmental disruption. Ancient builders created these climate archives during transitional periods when Earth's atmospheric systems underwent major shifts. The knowledge appears precisely when human populations needed information about long-term climate trends for survival and adaptation strategies. Recent discoveries in classified climate research have revealed government studies comparing ancient climate predictions to contemporary environmental projections. Military planners recognize that monument-encoded forecasts accurately describe security threats from climate change, resource conflicts, and population displacement scenarios. The knowledge preserved in ancient stone circles apparently contains information relevant to modern strategic planning. The mathematical encoding becomes even more sophisticated when examined using advanced atmospheric modeling software. Ancient climate data contains information about feedback loops, tipping points, and cascade effects that operate according to principles of complex systems theory. The monument builders possessed an understanding of climate dynamics that required computational analysis and mathematical sophistication. What's truly unsettling is how climate knowledge connects to the astronomical information tracked by megalithic observatories. Ancient builders understood the relationships between celestial mechanics and atmospheric changes with scientific precision that matches modern space-based climate monitoring. They knew how solar radiation, cosmic rays, and planetary influences affect Earth's weather systems across geological timescales. The pattern reveals itself through computational analysis of monument positioning and astronomical alignments. Ancient climate archives are integrated with observatories tracking solar activity, planetary configurations, and stellar cycles that influence atmospheric conditions. The builders created comprehensive monitoring networks for tracking cosmic influences on Earth's climate system. Perhaps most terrifying is the prophetic timeline preserved in ancient climate data. Monument-encoded predictions don't just describe natural climate cycles, they accurately forecast the timing and magnitude of human-induced atmospheric changes. The stone builders somehow knew when technological civilization would develop and how it would affect global climate systems. The preservation network reveals itself through recent discoveries of hidden climate chambers within megalithic complexes. Ground-penetrating radar has located sealed repositories containing additional climate data, atmospheric measurements, and environmental information that haven't yet been fully decoded. Ancient builders apparently created vast underground libraries of climate knowledge. Modern atmospheric physicists studying these ancient climate systems recognize mathematical principles that exceed current understanding of weather prediction and climate modeling. The monument-encoded data employs techniques for long-term forecasting, uncertainty quantification, and system dynamics analysis that represent advances beyond contemporary climate science. Someone possessed meteorological knowledge that remains ahead of current human capabilities. The preservation methods reveal an understanding of information, encoding that rivals modern environmental monitoring systems. The climate data was embedded using mathematical relationships that maintain accuracy despite monument weathering and geological changes. Someone designed these atmospheric archives to preserve climate knowledge across the very environmental shifts they predicted. What's particularly disturbing is how ancient climate predictions connect to the survival protocols found in other forms of preserved knowledge. Monument-encoded data references, genetic adaptation strategies, technological requirements, and social organization needed for surviving specific climate scenarios. Someone was creating comprehensive survival guides for navigating predicted environmental changes. The pattern suggests something far more deliberate than primitive weather observation or seasonal calendar making. The knowledge appears when human populations develop agricultural societies dependent on climate stability, provides exactly the environmental information needed for long-term survival planning, then persists through monument preservation until rediscovered by civilizations facing predicted climate threats. Recent analysis has revealed that ancient climate data contains instructions for technological adaptations to environmental change that haven't yet been fully developed. The monuments encode information about renewable energy systems, atmospheric engineering, and ecological restoration techniques that correspond to cutting-edge research in contemporary environmental science. Ancient builders somehow knew which technologies would be needed for surviving future climate catastrophes. The implications become unavoidable when you consider the sophistication of climate knowledge preserved in these ancient sources. The monuments contain atmospheric science information that requires satellite monitoring, computer modeling, and advanced mathematical analysis to obtain. Someone possessed scientific capabilities that far exceeded any known Stone Age civilization. But perhaps the most disturbing realization emerges when you examine what these climate predictions collectively represent. They're not just environmental documentation. They're comprehensive warning systems. The monuments preserve climate knowledge needed to prepare for atmospheric catastrophes, adapt to environmental changes, and maintain civilization through predicted climate shifts. Someone knew that human technological development would trigger specific climate responses and preserved exactly the environmental information needed for species survival. The final piece of evidence lies in what happens when you combine ancient climate data with other forms of preserved advanced knowledge. The atmospheric predictions reference astronomical cycles, genetic adaptation requirements, survival technologies, and social organization strategies needed for navigating environmental catastrophes. Someone was creating an integrated survival database that linked climate science with all other forms of knowledge needed for human continuity through predicted environmental collapse. The ancient Egyptian relief carved into the wall of the Temple of Kom-Ombo depicts something that shouldn't exist in any civilization before the modern era. A detailed surgical procedure showing doctors performing what appears to be brain surgery using instruments that match contemporary neurosurgical tools with startling precision. When medical historian Dr. Sarah Hassan first examined these reliefs in 2015, she assumed she was looking at symbolic religious artwork. What she discovered instead challenged everything modern medicine believed about the evolution of surgical knowledge. The carved figures aren't engaged in ritual or mythological activities. They're demonstrating advanced medical procedures with anatomical accuracy that requires understanding of human physiology at the cellular level. The surgical instruments depicted match modern designs for craniotomy. The positioning of medical personnel follows contemporary sterile technique protocols, and the patient preparation procedures mirror current neurosurgical standards. Someone 4,000 years ago possessed medical knowledge that wouldn't be formally developed until the 20th century. The anatomical precision becomes even more disturbing when examined under magnification. The relief shows a detailed understanding of brain structure, cranial suturing patterns, and neural pathway mapping that requires microscopic observation and advanced imaging technology. Ancient Egyptian artists somehow knew about cerebral cortex organization, ventricular systems, and blood vessel arrangements that weren't documented until the development of MRI, scanning and electron microscopy. But the Temple of Kom-Ombo represents only one entry in a global database of impossible medical knowledge preserved in ancient artwork. Mayan codices contain detailed anatomical diagrams showing cardiovascular systems with precision that matches modern medical textbooks. Hindu temple sculptures depict surgical procedures involving organ transplantation, blood transfusion, and tissue grafting using techniques that correspond to contemporary medical protocols. What makes this medical knowledge even more impossible is its understanding of concepts that require laboratory analysis and scientific instrumentation to verify. Ancient texts describe germ theory, antibiotic properties, and infection control measures with clinical accuracy that shouldn't have been possible before the invention of microscopes. Egyptian medical papyri contain pharmaceutical formulations that match modern drug compositions for treating specific diseases. The preservation of surgical knowledge reveals an understanding of both human anatomy and medical technology that far exceeded any known ancient civilization. Temple reliefs show detailed depictions of anesthesia administration, blood pressure monitoring, and life support systems that mirror contemporary medical equipment. Someone possessed comprehensive medical knowledge and the technological capability to implement advanced surgical procedures. Recent analysis by medical professionals has confirmed that ancient surgical procedures depicted in artwork would indeed be effective using modern medical standards. The techniques show understanding of anatomy, physiology, and surgical principles that match current medical education. Computer modeling reveals that ancient surgical methods would achieve success rates comparable to contemporary operations performed under sterile conditions. Modern surgeons studying these ancient medical depictions describe feeling as if they're examining instructional materials from advanced medical schools. The level of anatomical detail mirrors contemporary surgical atlases. The procedural sequences match what's taught in current medical training programs. Someone possessed medical knowledge that required centuries of scientific development and clinical experience. The global distribution of medical knowledge suggests coordinated documentation rather than independent medical discovery. Similar surgical techniques appear simultaneously in artwork across cultures that had no known contact, all containing identical information about human anatomy and medical procedures. The knowledge wasn't gradually developed through trial and error medical practice. It appeared fully formed in multiple locations worldwide. Perhaps most chilling is the prophetic accuracy of medical knowledge preserved in ancient sources. The artwork doesn't just show contemporary medical understanding, it accurately depicts future medical developments, genetic therapies, and biotechnology applications that match cutting-edge research in 21st century medicine. Ancient artists somehow knew about medical advances that wouldn't be developed for millennia. The mathematical precision encoded in medical artwork reveals an understanding of human physiology that requires biochemical analysis and molecular biology to obtain. Ancient depictions show accurate representations of DNA structure, protein synthesis, and cellular metabolism that weren't discovered until the development of modern laboratory techniques. The artists possessed knowledge of human biology at the molecular level. What's truly unsettling is how medical knowledge connects to the genetic information found in ancient texts and the survival protocols preserved in flood narratives. Ancient medical artwork depicts specific treatments for radiation exposure, genetic disorders, and environmental toxicity that correspond exactly to the survival challenges described in other preserved knowledge systems. Someone possessed an integrated understanding of medicine, genetics, and environmental health. The timing of medical artwork creation correlates with documented periods of population stress and environmental catastrophe. Ancient civilizations preserved detailed medical knowledge during times when human populations faced extinction-level health threats. The knowledge appears precisely when societies needed advanced medical capabilities for survival through biological crises. Recent discoveries in classified medical research have revealed government studies examining ancient surgical techniques and pharmaceutical formulations. Military medical personnel recognize that historical artwork contains information about trauma treatment, biological warfare countermeasures, and emergency medicine that remains relevant to contemporary medical practice. The knowledge preserved in ancient temples apparently exceeds current understanding of certain medical specialties. The preservation techniques demonstrate understanding of medical education and knowledge transmission that rivals modern training systems. Medical knowledge was embedded in artwork, architectural designs, and ritual practices using redundant encoding that maintains accuracy despite cultural transmissions. Someone designed comprehensive medical education systems for preserving surgical knowledge across civilizational collapses. Modern medical researchers have identified specific techniques in ancient artwork that correspond to experimental procedures currently being developed in cutting-edge medical research. The depictions show understanding of regenerative medicine, genetic engineering, and nanotechnology applications that reflect advances beyond current medical capabilities. Ancient artists somehow knew about medical technologies that are still being developed today. The mathematical encoding becomes even more sophisticated when examined using modern medical imaging and analysis software. Ancient medical artwork contains information about physiological processes, biochemical pathways, and therapeutic mechanisms that operate according to principles of molecular medicine. The artists possessed an understanding of human biology that required advanced scientific instrumentation and computational analysis. Perhaps most terrifying is the pattern of medical knowledge preservation across different forms of ancient information storage. The surgical techniques depicted in artwork correlate with genetic repair protocols found in ancient texts, survival medicine described in flood narratives, and biological adaptation strategies encoded in climate predictions. Someone was creating a comprehensive medical database for surviving multiple types of catastrophic threats to human health. The preservation network reveals itself through archaeological discoveries of medical instruments and surgical tools at ancient sites worldwide. Excavations have uncovered sophisticated medical equipment that matches the tools depicted in ancient artwork. Instruments designed for precision surgery, pharmaceutical preparation, and medical diagnosis using techniques that correspond to contemporary medical practice. What's particularly disturbing is how ancient medical knowledge connects to the astronomical cycles tracked by megalithic observatories and the environmental predictions preserved in climate monuments. Medical artwork depicts health threats that correlate with specific celestial events and climate changes, diseases, genetic damage, and environmental toxicity that appear according to predictable astronomical and atmospheric cycles. The pattern suggests something far more deliberate than primitive medical observation or trial and error healing practices. The knowledge appears when human populations develop agricultural societies vulnerable to epidemic diseases, provides exactly the medical information needed for treating specific health threats, and then persists through artistic preservation until rediscovered by civilizations facing predicted medical challenges. Recent analysis has revealed that ancient medical artwork contains instructions for biotechnology applications and genetic therapies that haven't yet been fully developed. The depictions show understanding of cellular repair mechanisms, immune system enhancement, and longevity treatments that correspond to cutting-edge research in contemporary medical science. Ancient artists somehow knew which medical technologies would be needed for treating future health threats. The implications become unavoidable when you consider the sophistication of medical knowledge preserved in these ancient sources. The artwork contains clinical information that requires laboratory analysis, medical imaging, and pharmaceutical research to obtain. Someone possessed medical capabilities that far exceeded any known ancient civilization. But perhaps the most disturbing realization emerges when you examine what these medical depictions collectively represent. They're not just documentation of primitive healing practices. They're comprehensive medical manuals designed to treat specific health threats associated with catastrophic events. The artwork preserves surgical knowledge, pharmaceutical information, and therapeutic protocols needed to maintain human health through predicted biological crises. The final piece of evidence lies in what happens when you combine ancient medical knowledge with other forms of preserved, advanced information. The surgical techniques reference genetic adaptation requirements, environmental toxicity treatments, radiation exposure therapies, and survival medicine protocols needed for navigating multiple types of catastrophic threats to human survival. Someone was creating an integrated medical database that linked clinical knowledge with all other forms of information needed for maintaining human health through predicted civilizational collapse and environmental catastrophe. Dr. Elena Marchetti stared at the holographic display floating above her desk in the International Institute for Temporal Studies, her hands trembling as she processed what the quantum computer had just revealed. For 3 years, her team had been feeding ancient knowledge databases into artificial intelligence systems, searching for patterns that human minds couldn't detect. What emerged from the analysis was a timeline so precise, so terrifyingly accurate, that it could only mean one thing. Every piece of impossible knowledge we've discovered, the meteoric metallurgy, the impossible maps, the stellar alignments, the nuclear warnings, the genetic codes, the flood protocols, the binary messages, the climate predictions, the medical manuals, all of it converges on a single point in history. Our time. Right now. The mathematical precision was undeniable. When the AI plotted the timeline embedded in ancient sources, every prediction, every warning, every preserved piece of advanced knowledge pointed to the same temporal coordinates, the early 21st century. The Mayan calendar's end date, the Hindu Yuga cycles, the Egyptian prophecies, the Norse Ragnarok timeline, they all calculated to within a decade of our current era. Someone had been counting down to this exact moment for millennia. The convergence wasn't random. Every form of ancient knowledge we've examined contains embedded timestamps that correlate with contemporary events with startling accuracy. The nuclear warnings in Sanskrit texts predicted the exact timeline of atomic weapons development. The climate data in megalithic monuments forecasted the precise period when human activities would trigger catastrophic environmental change. The genetic codes preserved timing information for when humanity would develop biotechnology capable of genetic manipulation. But what truly disturbed Dr. Marchetti was the pattern the AI had detected in the knowledge distribution. The ancient information wasn't just preserved randomly throughout history, it was strategically released. Each piece of impossible knowledge surfaced exactly when human technological development reached the point where we could understand its significance. The meteoric metallurgy was discovered when we developed spectroscopic analysis. The astronomical alignments were decoded when we built computer modeling systems. The genetic codes were found when we mapped the human genome. The timing suggests something far more deliberate than coincidental preservation. Someone has been carefully orchestrating the release of advanced knowledge to guide human development toward this specific historical moment. Each discovery provides exactly the information needed for the next phase of technological advancement, creating a guided progression toward our current capabilities. Recent analysis of newly discovered ancient sites has revealed even more disturbing evidence. Hidden chambers beneath megalithic complexes contain what appear to be countdown mechanisms, stone calendars that have been tracking time for thousands of years, all pointing to the same temporal destination. Archaeological teams report finding sealed repositories that were designed to open automatically when specific astronomical conditions are met, conditions that are occurring right now. The convergence extends beyond timing into technological capability. Every piece of ancient knowledge we've discovered requires our current level of scientific advancement to decode properly. The binary codes need computer analysis, the genetic sequences require DNA technology, the astronomical data demands satellite verification, and the nuclear information needs particle physics to understand. Someone knew exactly what technological capabilities we would possess at this moment in history. Modern government analysis has confirmed what independent researchers have been reluctant to acknowledge. The ancient knowledge contains detailed information about 21st century threats that matches classified intelligence assessments with frightening accuracy. The preserved warnings describe specific challenges facing contemporary civilization: nuclear proliferation, climate change, genetic engineering risks, artificial intelligence development, and resource depletion scenarios that mirror current strategic planning documents. The mathematical modeling becomes even more precise when examined using quantum computing analysis. Ancient knowledge systems contain information about technological development timelines, social organization patterns, and environmental changes that accurately predict the exact conditions of our current era. The Preservation Network anticipated not just when these challenges would arise, but how human civilization would respond to them. Perhaps most chilling is what the Convergence timeline reveals about our immediate future. The ancient warnings don't just point to our current era as a destination. They describe it as a critical decision point. Every preserved piece of knowledge contains information about branching possibilities, alternative timelines, and the consequences of different choices that humanity might make right now. The pattern suggests that our current moment represents more than just a predicted crisis. It's a carefully orchestrated test. Someone has spent millennia preparing humanity for this exact set of challenges, providing the knowledge and tools needed to navigate successfully through what appears to be a civilizational bottleneck. The question is whether we'll recognize the warnings and apply the preserved knowledge correctly. Recent discoveries in quantum archaeology have revealed that some ancient sites contain what appear to be monitoring systems, technological artifacts that have been tracking human development for thousands of years, waiting for specific conditions to be met. These systems appear to be activating now, suggesting that whoever placed the ancient warnings has been observing our progress and timing the release of additional information. The global nature of the convergence indicates coordination on a scale that exceeds any known historical civilization. The ancient knowledge network spans every continent, incorporates multiple cultural traditions, and maintains mathematical consistency across languages and time periods. Someone possessed global reach, advanced technology, and detailed knowledge of future historical developments spanning millennia. What's truly unsettling is how the convergence timeline correlates with contemporary technological capabilities that weren't officially developed until recent decades. The ancient warnings accurately predicted when humanity would develop artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, quantum computing, and space travel. Technologies that enable us to verify the advanced knowledge preserved in ancient sources. The Preservation Network reveals its true sophistication through recent breakthroughs in archaeological technology. Ground-penetrating radar, satellite imaging, and quantum sensing equipment are locating hidden repositories of ancient knowledge at an accelerating rate. These discoveries suggest that much more advanced information remains to be found, timed for release as our technological capabilities continue to develop. Modern intelligence analysis has identified specific ancient warnings that describe current geopolitical situations with startling accuracy. The preserved knowledge contains information about resource conflicts, technological competitions, and social upheavals that match contemporary strategic assessments. Someone knew exactly what challenges human civilization would face at this point in history. The mathematical encoding reveals planning that extends far beyond simple knowledge preservation. Ancient systems contain detailed instructions for technological applications, social organization strategies, and survival protocols specifically designed for navigating early 21st century conditions. The knowledge isn't just preserved for future reference, it's actively designed to guide current decision-making. Perhaps most terrifying is what happens when you examine the convergence timeline in reverse. Working backward from our current era, every major technological breakthrough, every scientific discovery, every cultural development that led to our current capabilities can be traced to ancient knowledge preservation networks. Someone has been guiding human intellectual development for millennia, ensuring we would possess exactly the knowledge and tools needed for this moment. The implications become unavoidable when you consider the sophistication of planning required to orchestrate such a timeline. Predicting human technological development across thousands of years requires an understanding of social psychology, technological progression, and historical patterns that far exceed any known ancient civilization. Someone possessed capabilities for temporal planning that suggest knowledge of future events spanning millennia. But perhaps the most disturbing realization emerges when you examine what the convergence represents. This isn't just a predicted crisis or a technological milestone, it's a graduation test. Every piece of ancient knowledge we've discovered, every warning we've decoded, every tool we've been given has been preparing us for decisions we must make right now. The question isn't whether we can survive the challenges ahead. It's whether we've learned enough from the ancient warnings to make the choices that ensure human civilization's continued development. The final piece of evidence lies in what's still being discovered. Archaeological teams report finding new sites almost daily, each containing more advanced knowledge timed for current revelation. The ancient network isn't finished releasing information, it's accelerating. Someone knew that as we approach the critical decision point, we would need access to increasingly sophisticated knowledge and tools for navigating the choices ahead. The convergence timeline suggests that everything we've experienced in human history has been a carefully guided preparation for this moment. Every technological breakthrough, every scientific discovery, every preserved warning has led leading to now. The ancient knowledge wasn't just predicting our future, it was creating it, ensuring that we would develop the capabilities and understanding needed to pass the ultimate test of civilizational maturity. The question that haunts Dr. Marchetti as she stares at the convergence data isn't who left these warnings, it's what happens next if we fail to heed them. Because embedded within every ancient knowledge system is the same terrifying implication. This moment of convergence represents either humanity's graduation to the next level of existence, or our final opportunity to avoid the same fate that befell whoever tried so desperately to warn us across the millennia.